I suppose this is the part where I finally tell the truth. Not because the truth is easy now, it is not. Some memories do not become lighter with time. They only become clearer, like coastlines seen after fog lifts. My name is Daniel Mercer. I am 32 years old. I am a software engineer, the kind of man people assume lives mostly inside screens, code, and calculations. For most of my adult life, that was not far from the truth. I built control systems for oil extraction equipment, which sounds even less romantic than it is. But that unromantic work took me to the edge of the world 3 years ago. It put me on the porch of an engineering office at a remote oil service camp outside Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, and it put her in front of me. 2 suitcases, 1 light coat, 1 face trying not to show fear. That was how my life changed. Alaska does not smell like other places. I understood that on my first day. There is salt in the air, and diesel, and cold iron, and something bitter from the machinery that seems to settle into your jacket, your skin, even your thoughts. At the edge of the camp, beyond the lights and fuel tanks, the land stretched flat and merciless toward the Arctic Ocean. The sky was too wide. The wind sounded as if it had been traveling for years and was angry to find people in its way. Some men hated it immediately. I did not. There was honesty in it. The edge of the world does not flatter you. It does not ask whether you are comfortable. It simply stands there, cold and endless, and lets you discover what is real. I had come on a contract. Deadlines, equipment testing, control software for pump systems on offshore platforms. A temporary assignment, 6 weeks if everything went well, longer if it did not. Things rarely went well in places like that. The evening I first saw her, I had been working for nearly 3 days without proper sleep. The deadline was pressing hard. Outside the office windows, late September had already begun pretending to be winter. Fog moved low over the yard. Floodlights trembled in the mist. The buildings of the camp looked identical in the gray, all metal siding, square windows, yellow safety signs, and mud tracked everywhere no matter how often anyone cleaned. At around 7, I finished the last block of calculations, leaned back in my chair, and felt my shoulders drop for the first time in hours. I put on my jacket and stepped outside, just to breathe. That was when I saw her. She stood in the middle of the yard with 2 large suitcases beside her. 1 black, 1 burgundy. Both looked heavy. She was not carrying them anymore. She had simply set them down and was looking from building to building, turning her head slowly, as if the right door might reveal itself if she stared long enough. She was dressed completely wrong for the North Slope. A pale wool coat with a narrow belt, city shoes, no hat, no gloves, the kind of coat a woman might wear in Seattle in October, maybe Portland, maybe anywhere that still believed autumn was a season and not a warning. In Prudhoe Bay, in late September, that coat was a mistake. I watched her for 10 seconds, maybe more. There was something about the picture that tightened in my chest. A woman alone, 2 suitcases, a lost expression, that absurd pale coat in the cold wind. Not pity, something else. Something I did not have a name for yet. I walked down the steps. "Do you need help?" She turned. Her hair was dark blonde, damp from the sea air, sticking slightly to one cheek. Her eyes were gray-green, tired and bright at the same time. She looked straight at me without fear, but with the kind of confusion people have when they know they have made the right decision and simply cannot understand where that decision has brought them. "I came to see my husband," she said. "He works here, on the platforms. He said he would be back tomorrow, but I thought there would be somewhere to stay. I cannot find the hotel, or maybe there is no hotel. Everything looks the same." Her name was Grace. Grace Whitman. Her husband's name was Ryan. The moment she said it, something inside me gave a small, hard warning. Not because she had a husband, or not only because of that, it was more specific, more physical. The strange, sharp tug of intuition, the kind I usually ignored because I preferred evidence, logs, numbers, proof. Something is wrong. There is no hotel in the camp, I said. She blinked. No hotel? Not for visitors. There are crew dorms, but they require clearance. Who exactly is your husband? Ryan Whitman. He works logistics. He told me he arranged it. I knew the name. Everyone did. Ryan Whitman was one of those men who made noise wherever he went. Loud laugh, loud truck, loud opinions. He worked in marine logistics, knew people in every department, and had the easy confidence of a man who had learned early that charm could be used like a master key. I had never liked him. I had never had a reason strong enough to say so. When did he say he was coming in? Tomorrow morning. He told me the supply vessel was delayed. I looked toward the road that led to the docks. I had seen Ryan 2 hours earlier. He had been laughing outside the equipment shed with 2 men from transport. I remember the cold feeling that moved through me then. Not surprise exactly, confirmation of a thing I had not yet wanted to know. Come inside, I said. You're freezing. She hesitated. I don't want to cause trouble. You already came to Prudhoe Bay in a fall coat. Trouble has accepted the invitation. For the first time, she smiled. It was quick and small, but it changed her whole face. I carried the burgundy suitcase. She pulled the black one. Inside the engineering office, the air smelled of burnt coffee, printer toner, and wet boots. I found a chair in the break room, gave her my spare fleece jacket, and called the camp housing coordinator. No booking under Whitman, no visitor clearance request, no record of a spouse arriving. Grace sat very still while I listened to the coordinator speak. She understood before I ended the call. Maybe he forgot, she said. It was the kind of sentence people say when they already know forgetting is not the answer, but need one more minute before the truth comes in. Maybe, I said. We both knew I was lying politely. The coordinator finally agreed to let her use an empty contractor room for one night, unofficially, because a storm warning had come in and no one wanted a visitor wandering the camp after dark. I carried her bags down a narrow hall to a small room with 2 metal-framed beds, a desk, a heater that rattled, and a window facing the yard. It is not much, I said. It is more than I had 10 minutes ago. She stood in the doorway, holding the sleeve of my fleece closed around herself. Thank you. Get some sleep. Ryan will be back tomorrow. She nodded, but there was a shadow in her eyes, as if some part of her already knew tomorrow would not bring what she had come for. I went back to my desk after that, but I did not work. The calculations were still open on my monitor. Lines of data, pressure values, alarm tolerances, all the things that had seemed urgent an hour earlier. I looked at them and saw nothing. My mind kept returning to the woman in the contractor room, to the way she had thanked me as if I had done something enormous when all I had done was keep her from freezing. Around 10, I passed her door on my way to the printer. Light showed under it. I should have kept walking. Instead, I knocked softly. Grace, everything all right? There was a pause. Then the door opened. She had changed into a sweater and jeans, but she still wore my fleece over them. Her face looked smaller without the effort of being composed in public. I can't sleep, she said. The heater makes that sound all night. It isn't the heater. I nodded. She looked embarrassed by her own honesty. I keep thinking I made a mistake. Coming here? Believing him? The hallway light hummed above us. Somewhere outside, a truck reversed with 3 dull warning beeps, then silence. You came to see your husband, I said. that is not a mistake. It feels like one. That may be because he failed to do the part that would have made it make sense. She looked at me carefully, as if deciding whether I was being kind or merely polite. Do you know him? Enough to know his voice carries. That almost made her smile. He is charming, she said. I have noticed. That was not an insult when I married him. Most dangerous things do not introduce themselves as dangerous. She leaned her shoulder against the doorframe. You talk like a man who spends too much time alone. I do. Do you like it? I considered lying, then I did not. Sometimes. Sometimes I only like the fact that no one can tell the difference. For the first time, she really looked at me, not as a helpful stranger, not as another man in the camp, as a person. That is a sad answer, she said. Yes. We stood there for another minute, both aware that the conversation had become more personal than it should have been. Then she pulled the fleece tighter. Thank you for not making me feel foolish. I wanted to tell her she was not foolish, but people rarely believe direct mercy when shame is loud in their ears. So I said, get some sleep if you can. Morning comes early here. Does it look better in daylight? I glanced toward the window at the end of the hall, where fog pressed against the glass. Different, I said. That is not the same as better. No, she smiled then, tired and genuine. Good night, Daniel. Good night. I walked back to my desk and sat there a long time. There are moments that do not announce themselves as beginnings. They do not come with music or lightning. Sometimes the beginning is only a woman in a borrowed fleece, asking whether a place looks better in daylight. The next morning, I saw Ryan at the small market near the dock. I had gone to buy coffee because the office coffee tasted like battery acid and regret. The market was little more than a convenience store with a counter selling hot sandwiches, canned soup, gloves, batteries, and everything people suddenly realized they needed when the nearest real city was very far away. Ryan stood near the refrigerated case, laughing. Not a nervous laugh. Not the laugh of a man who had just returned from a difficult shift offshore. A full, easy laugh. Beside him stood a woman in a dark green parka, short, strong-looking, with a round face and hair tucked under a knit hat. In her arms was a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. Ryan leaned toward her, said something, and the woman laughed too, head tilted back, completely at ease. Then the baby reached for him. Ryan took the child without hesitation. Not awkwardly, not like a man holding someone else's baby, like a father. He settled the child against his shoulder with one hand, then put his other arm around the woman's back in a gesture so familiar, so practiced, that I felt something metallic rise in my mouth. I stepped behind the end of an aisle before he could see me. For several seconds, I stood there among motor oil, protein bars, and paper towels, breathing cold air that did not warm in my lungs. Ryan was not offshore. He had not been delayed. He had not called his wife, who had traveled thousands of miles with 2 suitcases and slept in a contractor room because he had not bothered to arrange a bed. He was in the market, holding a baby, laughing with another woman as if the life Grace believed in did not exist. I walked back to the office too fast. Grace was already awake. I found her in the hallway outside the room, hair brushed, suitcase partly repacked, phone in hand. She looked different from the night before, still tired, but lit from within by nervous anticipation. He texted, she said before I asked. He says he came in early. He wants to meet me at 1 by the administration building. Not his quarters. Not the apartment address she thought she knew. The administration building. Neutral ground. Public. Impersonal. She did not notice what that meant. I did. "I can show you where it is," I said. "Thank you. I think I can find it if you point me in the right direction." We stepped outside. The air was sharp. Fog dragged low across the yard. I showed her the path. She listened carefully, biting her lower lip the way she did when she was trying to concentrate while frightened. I should have told her then. I have asked myself that 1,000 times. Should I have said, "I saw him, I saw the woman, I saw the baby," but I did not. I was a stranger. She had known me less than 1 day. I had no right to place my version of truth between a wife and her husband before she had even seen him. So I said nothing. At 1, she went to meet him. At 2:30, she came back. I saw her from the office window before she reached the steps. She was walking slowly, without the black suitcase, without the nervous brightness. Her face looked pale and emptied out, as if something inside her had been removed carefully and completely. I met her at the door. "Grace." She looked at me. He said I should not have come. That was the first thing. Not that he was sorry, not that there was another woman, not that he had lied. He said she should not have come. We went into the empty conference room because the hallway was full of people pretending not to look. She sat at the table, hands folded, and told me in a voice so calm it frightened me. Ryan had said their marriage was complicated, that distance had changed things, that he had not known how to tell her, that the woman I had seen was named Melissa, that the baby was his, that the baby was 5 months old. Grace had been married to him for 3 years. He had kept both lives running for more than a year. He said Melissa understood him, Grace said. Her voice did not shake. That made every word worse. He said she did not ask him to be someone else, that she knew what this life was, the rotations, the distance, the uncertainty. He said I always wanted him to be present in a way he could not be. She gave a small laugh, as if wanting your husband to come home is a character flaw. I said nothing because anything I said would have been too angry to help. Then he said the baby changed everything, that he had responsibilities now. Now, I repeated. She looked at me. I said that too. What did he say? He told me not to make this ugly. That sentence entered me like cold water. Not make this ugly. As if ugliness began when a betrayed woman named the Betrayal, not when a man built a second family in the shadow of the first. Did you ask why he brought you here? Yes. And? He said he panicked when I told him I was buying the ticket. He thought he could explain before I arrived, then he said he got busy. She looked toward the window. Busy. For the first time, her face changed. Not tears, not yet. Something sharper. Disbelief finally catching up with humiliation. I sold my share of my business for him, she said. Did I tell you that? No. A flower studio. My friend and I built it from nothing. Ryan said moving back and forth was too hard, that marriage needed one of us to be flexible. He said his job paid more, so it had to be mine. Grace, I know, I hear it now. She pressed her fingers to her lips. I hear all of it now. Did he apologize? I asked. She looked at the table. He said he never meant to hurt me. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because some sentences are so cowardly they deserve a sound. Grace did not cry. That was worse. She only said she needed to buy a ticket back to Seattle. She needed to call her sister. She needed to pack. She needed to leave before she became someone who begged a man for decency. She spoke like a person making a list because the list was the only thing keeping her upright. I sat on the floor beside the conference room wall. It was absurd. I was a grown man in a contractor office, sitting on industrial carpet, while a woman I'd met the night before sat at a table with her life split open. But I did not know what else to do. She looked down at me. After a moment, she slid off the chair and sat beside me. We stayed there, shoulder to shoulder, while fog pressed against the windows. "I should be crying," she whispered. "Maybe. I'm not. That happens too. It is just empty, not painful, not cold, empty, like a room after all the furniture is gone." I said the first true thing that came to me. Empty is not the end. Sometimes empty is the space where something else can finally arrive. She did not answer, but after a while she leaned her shoulder against mine. Barely. Enough. The next morning, Grace made a decision. I could see it before she spoke. She came into the engineering room with her hair tied back, face pale but steady, and said she was leaving that day if possible, the next morning if not. She wanted one thing first. "I need one honest sentence from him," she said. "About what?" "About why. Why he asked me to come. Why he married me. Why he let me stand here like a fool with suitcases when he already had another life. I don't need a speech. I need one honest sentence so I can close the door." I understood. Sometimes people do not need revenge. They need a clean answer. Without it, you leave, but the door stays open behind you, banging in the wind. I found a ticket for the next morning. Expensive. Terrible route. Prudhoe Bay to Anchorage, Anchorage to Seattle. She wrote down the details and said she would meet Ryan by the base gate, then come back, pay, and pack. She left with a small crossbody purse, phone, wallet, passport, cash, printed travel document, everything. I watched the clock. 1 hour passed, then 90 minutes. I told myself they were talking. Then someone knocked on the office door. Grace stood there with empty hands. I knew before she spoke. My purse was stolen. The strap had been cut. Cleanly. She had been standing by the gate during shift change, surrounded by workers, trucks, noise, bodies moving in every direction. She felt a bump, thought someone had brushed past her, then reached for her phone a minute later and found nothing. No phone, no wallet, no passport, no ticket information, no cash, nothing. She was stranded in a remote Alaskan camp where she had come for a husband who had already replaced her. I felt something hot and dark rise in me. I am not an impulsive man. I solve problems with systems, not rage. But that day, standing in front of Grace with her cut purse strap in her hand, I wanted to find Ryan Whitman and make him understand fear in a language he could not charm his way out of. Instead, I made tea. It sounds ridiculous. But sometimes the only thing a person can do against chaos is boil water. We reported the theft. Security took notes with the bored seriousness of men who knew the odds of finding the purse were almost nothing. I drove Grace to the administrative office, then helped her contact the state trooper post, the airline, the nearest consular office for replacement ID documentation, and her sister. That evening, she sat at my desk while I printed forms and made calls. "I am sorry," she said for the 5th time. "Stop apologizing. I am causing problems." "No, problems are what Ryan causes. You are standing near the explosion." She laughed once, short and broken. The replacement process became a map of humiliation. Every person on the phone needed the same story. Name, date of birth, last known address, why she was in Alaska, when the purse was stolen, what identification was missing, whether she had filed a police report, whether she could verify her identity another way. By the 4th call, Grace's voice had become flat. By the 6th, she stopped speaking and handed me the phone. I gave facts. She stared at the wall. There was a moment when the airline agent said, "Ma'am, without valid ID, we cannot allow boarding." and Grace turned away so quickly I thought she might be sick. I put the call on hold. "We will solve it," I said. "You do not know that." "No, but I know the next call." "How can you be so calm?" "I am not calm. I am organized." She looked at me then, and something like gratitude moved across her face, but also exhaustion. "I don't want to be a problem someone organizes. Then be a person I am helping." The words came out more gently than I expected. She lowered her eyes. "I don't remember how." That was the first time I understood that Ryan had not only betrayed her, he had trained her. Trained her to make herself small, to apologize for needs, to treat help as debt, to explain pain politely so no one would be inconvenienced by it. I began to hate him in a more precise way after that. By then, the storm warning had become real. Wind hit the walls hard enough to make them creak. The camp manager agreed she could stay in the contractor room until emergency documents were arranged. It might take days. Ryan called me that night from a number I did not recognize. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "Daniel, right?" "Yes." "I hear you are helping my wife." "Someone should." A pause, then a soft laugh. "This is a private matter." "Then you should have handled it privately before she had to sleep in an engineering office." His tone changed by half a degree. "You are a contractor here. I know people in this camp. I know how long your contract runs. You might want to think carefully about whether you need extra trouble." He did not threaten me directly. Men like him rarely do. They prefer to leave the blade under a napkin and let you feel the shape. "Grace stays here as long as she needs," I said. "I help her as long as she needs. If you have legal concerns, you can write them down and send them to someone who cares." Then I hung up. My hand was steadier than my heartbeat. I did not tell Grace about the call, not because I wanted to keep secrets from her, because she already carried enough guilt that did not belong to her. The next day, a note appeared under the engineering office door. "Tell her to leave before people start asking why she came." Grace found it first. She read it, folded it once, and placed it on my desk. "That is him," she said. "Yes." "I am so tired." I wanted to say something useful. Nothing came, so I only said, "I know." Those days stretched strangely. The missing passport delayed everything. The airline would not reissue without proper identification. Her sister wired money, but the closest bank access was complicated and slow because of weather closures. Every simple task became a knot. Grace lived in the contractor room and moved through the camp like someone trying to take up as little space as possible. I hated that. So I began giving her tasks. At first, tiny ones: sort printed documents, check forms for spelling, help me organize a folder of receipts, then bigger ones. Call the agency, write the timeline, list every address where Ryan had claimed to live, list every date he had come to Seattle, list every excuse. It steadied her. Not because paperwork heals betrayal, because facts give the mind a rail to hold when emotions make the floor tilt. On the third evening, she made coffee for both of us in the break room. It was terrible coffee. She handed me a mug and said, "I used to own a flower shop." That was the first time she told me about herself without Ryan in the sentence. She had studied floral design in Seattle, opened a small shop with a friend, married Ryan after a whirlwind year, and sold her share of the business because he said long-distance marriage required sacrifices. "His sacrifices are yours?" I asked. She looked at me. "Mine, obviously." I just did not hear it that way at the time. We sat in the break room while the wind hammered the walls. She told me about dahlias, wedding bouquets, the way tulip stems keep growing after being cut, how roses open differently depending on temperature, how people reveal themselves when choosing flowers for funerals. Then she asked about me. No one did that in camps. People asked what you did, where you worked, when you were flying out, not who you were before the job. I told her about Pittsburgh, where I grew up, about my father, a steel worker who believed silence was a respectable language, about my mother, who taught math and kept every birthday card anyone ever gave her, about university, first contracts, why I liked remote work. Why? Grace asked. Because there is less noise. And what do you hear when there is less noise? I had never been asked that. Usually the thing I have been avoiding. She smiled into her mug. That sounds inconvenient. It is. Later, she leaned against my shoulder on the old couch in the office lounge and fell asleep. I sat there for 3 hours without moving. My arm went numb. My back hurt. The radiator clicked every few minutes like an accusation. I told myself I should wake her, that this was inappropriate, that I was becoming part of a story I had no right to enter. But she was asleep. For the first time since she arrived, her face was not braced against the next blow. So I stayed still. 12 days passed before her emergency documents came through. By then, I knew the sound of her steps in the hallway. I knew she bit her lip before saying something difficult. I knew she drank coffee too hot and hated scrambled eggs. I knew she could look at the ugliest place on earth and still find one color worth noticing. And I knew I was in trouble. Not a passing crush, not loneliness, not the hero feeling men sometimes mistake for love when a woman is wounded near them. Something quieter and far more dangerous. On the night before she was supposed to fly out, we stood outside the office in a fog so thick the camp lights looked like moons caught in dirty glass. I don't want to go back to Seattle, she said. You don't have to decide your whole life tonight. I have nowhere else. I should have said, you will figure it out. I should have said, your sister will help. I should have said anything that left me safely outside her future. Instead, I said, I have a new contract starting next month in Savannah. Engineering center, permanent position. I was going to take it. She looked at me. Savannah? Georgia, warm, Spanish moss, old houses, too many tourists, no polar wind. Why are you telling me this? Because I had carried the sentence for days, and it had become heavier than fear. Because if you need a place to start over, you could come too. Not as a promise you owe me. Not as anything you have to name. Just as a place where Ryan is not waiting around every corner. She stared at me for a long time. The fog moved between us. Daniel, I know. You don't even know me. I know enough to know I want to. She looked away. For a moment I thought I had ruined everything. Then she said, so quietly the wind almost took it, I am scared. So am I. Of what? That you will say yes because you are hurt. She looked back at me. And if I say no, then I will still drive you to the airport. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. I don't know what this is. Neither do I. That is not very reassuring. No. She laughed through tears. It was the first sound of hers that felt like daylight. 2 days later, she did not fly to Seattle. She flew to Anchorage with me, then to Atlanta. Then we drove south under a sky that looked too soft to be real after Alaska. Savannah smelled like rain, flowers, warm brick, and river mud. Grace stopped on the sidewalk outside the small apartment we had rented in the historic district and simply breathed. I watched her face change. Not happiness exactly. Relief mixed with disbelief. The expression of someone who had been running in darkness and suddenly stepped into light. We did not become a couple that day. I want to be clear about that. Real life is not a movie where betrayal ends and love begins in the next scene. Grace had a husband in another state, a stolen life to untangle, and a heart that had every right to distrust good timing. I slept on the couch for the first month. She took the bedroom. We bought plates at a thrift store. 2 mugs, 3 bowls, a frying pan with 1 loose handle. She found a job at a small flower studio 2 blocks from the apartment, owned by a woman named Nina who spoke fast, laughed louder, and could make a funeral arrangement look like forgiveness. The first evening, Grace came home from work. Her cheeks were flushed and there were green stains on her fingers from stems. She talked for 20 minutes without stopping. About the shop, about magnolias, about brides who changed their minds, about a delivery driver who sang to orchids, about how the flowers in Georgia were different, brighter, less restrained. I stood in the kitchen with a knife in my hand and half an onion on the board, pretending I was not memorizing her alive again. We lived quietly, not easily, quietly. There were bad mornings, days when she woke angry and did not know where to put it, days when a truck backfiring on the street made her flinch because Alaska had taught her to expect the next blow, days when she apologized for needing anything, and then became angry when I told her to stop apologizing. I made mistakes. Of course I did. Sometimes I tried to solve what needed only to be witnessed. Sometimes I spoke too carefully and she heard distance. Sometimes she withdrew, and I felt panic rise in me, the irrational fear that if I gave her space, she would vanish. We learned. Slowly. One evening, about 6 weeks after Savannah, she stood by the kitchen window while rain streaked the glass. "I think I might be pregnant," she said. I set down the dish towel. For a second, the room went silent in a way I will never forget. I do not mean quiet. I mean the kind of silence that feels as if the world is holding its breath with you. "Are you sure?" "No." "Do you want to be?" She turned. Fear and light. That was what I saw in her face. Fear because the timing was impossible, because Ryan still existed on paper, because every document in her life had become a battlefield. Light because beneath all that, beneath panic and law and shame, something in her had already reached toward the possibility. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I think I want this child." I walked around the table and crouched in front of her so she could look down at me, not up. I took her hands. "Then this is the best thing I have ever heard." She laughed and cried at the same time. That is something women can do in a way that looks impossible until you love one enough to understand it is not contradiction. It is fullness. The test was positive. The next morning, practical fear arrived. Divorce, paternity, insurance. Her temporary replacement, ID Ryan. Under the law, because Grace was still married, Ryan could create problems around legal presumptions of parentage if he wanted to. The very thought made her sick. I wrote to him first, short, formal, no anger. We requested an uncontested divorce. It was in everyone's interest. There was no reason to prolong it. For a week, nothing. Then a letter arrived from an attorney in Anchorage. The language was clean, professional, carefully ugly. Ryan wanted money, not child support, not property division, money in exchange for cooperation. The letter called it compensation for emotional damages, reputational harm, marital abandonment, and other phrases that looked expensive because that was the point. At the end, almost casually, the attorney noted that if Grace gave birth before the divorce was finalized, Ryan might be presumed the child's legal father, creating complex consequences. Grace read it sitting at the kitchen table. Her face went still. He would do that? I wanted to lie. Yes. She put both hands over her stomach. That gesture decided something in me. Not love. Love had already happened quietly, without permission. This was different. A line. I read the letter again and again, not the threats, the details. Ryan had always been careless beneath the charm. Men like him rely on people being too emotional to read carefully. But code had trained me to love details. Systems fail at the smallest point. Lies do too. The letter referred to Grace's abandonment of the marital residence in Seattle. But Ryan had never lived at that address during the relevant period. The apartment lease was in Grace's name alone. Ryan had been using a company housing address in Alaska while claiming different residency on tax documents, while living part-time with Melissa and the baby in camp housing that did not allow unreported dependents. That was the point. The loose thread. I pulled it. For 3 days, I did almost nothing else. I requested copies, public filings, housing records, travel reimbursements, corporate compliance logs, shipping assignment documents. I called a former colleague in Alaska who owed me a favor and asked for nothing illegal, only things that should have been on paper and strangely were not. Grace contacted her sister, who found old messages from Ryan saying he could not visit Seattle because the platform schedule was extended, on dates when company logs placed him on shore. By the end of the week, we had enough. Not for revenge, for leverage. Ryan had hidden an unauthorized domestic arrangement in company housing, filed inconsistent residency documents, and used company channels to conceal personal travel. Worse, the day Grace's purse was stolen, a security camera near the base gate had caught a man from Ryan's crew walking directly behind her minutes before the strap was cut. The footage did not show the theft clearly. It did not need to. It showed proximity, timing, and a lie Ryan had told security about where he was. There was one more thing. Small. Almost nothing. The kind of detail most people would skip because it looked too ordinary to matter. On the day Grace's purse was stolen, Ryan had submitted a maintenance access request for one of his crew members to enter the equipment office after hours. The request was time-stamped 23 minutes after the theft. Reason listed, misplaced personal item. The crew member's name matched the man in the security footage. I sat at my desk staring at that line until the letters blurred. Misplaced personal item. That was how careless men disguised cruelty when they had become too used to getting away with it. It still did not prove beyond doubt that Ryan ordered the theft, but it proved proximity, access, timing, and a lie. It proved enough to make a lawyer lean forward. It proved enough to make Ryan understand that the story he had controlled in Alaska could become a story told by someone else. Grace stood behind me as I printed the page. "You found something," she said. "Yes." "What?" I handed it to her. She read once, then again. Her hand went to her stomach, still barely changed, still more idea than visible life. "He knew where my purse went," she said. "I think he knew enough." She folded the page carefully, not angrily, carefully. "Then we use it." I heard the change in her voice. Not revenge, return. Some part of her, the part Ryan had tried to bury under shame and confusion, had found its feet. Our attorney, a calm woman in Savannah named Elaine Porter, read everything with a face that gave nothing away. Then she said, "Mr. Whitman appears to have mistaken cruelty for strategy." I liked her immediately. Elaine wrote one letter, just one. She did not insult him. She did not threaten dramatically. She listed facts, dates, documents, possible consequences, company ethics violations, housing fraud, witness names, the questionable timing of the theft, the legal risks of attempting to interfere with paternity and divorce proceedings in bad faith. At the end, she offered him a clean exit, sign the uncontested divorce, waive any claim, cease contact except through counsel. He signed in 9 days. Grace did not celebrate. She sat on the floor of the flower shop after closing with a bucket of unsold lilies beside her and cried for almost an hour. "Why am I crying?" she asked. I sat on the floor across from her. "Because free is still heavy when you have been carrying chains for a long time." She looked at me through tears. "That is annoyingly poetic." "I apologize." "Do not." After the papers were signed, Grace slept for 14 hours. I checked on her twice. The first time she was curled on her side with one hand under her cheek, the other resting loosely near her stomach. The second time, just after sunset, she opened her eyes before I could leave. "Is it real?" she asked. "The divorce?" "All of it." I sat on the edge of the chair near the bed. "Yes. I thought I would feel free." "What do you feel?" She stared at the ceiling. "Tired." "Then maybe freedom begins with sleep." She turned her head, looking at me with the faintest shadow of a smile. "You make everything sound like it belongs in a book." "I spend too much time thinking before speaking." "No," she said. "You spend enough." That sentence stayed with me. It was the first time anyone had spoken of my silence as something other than absence. The months that followed were the strangest and most beautiful of my life. Pregnancy changed Grace in ways neither of us expected, not into softness. People love to speak of pregnant women as if they become glowing symbols instead of human beings with swollen ankles and legal paperwork. Grace was not a symbol. She was tired, hungry, irritable, radiant at odd moments, afraid at others. She craved peaches in December. She cried once because I bought the wrong kind of crackers. She laughed so hard at herself afterward that she had to sit on the kitchen floor. I learned to assemble a crib. Badly at first, then correctly. I learned that baby clothes have impossible snaps, and that people with children speak in measurements no adult man should know. I learned that love can be practical without becoming small. Doctor appointments, insurance forms, ginger tea, back rubs, late-night walks under live oak trees hung with Spanish moss. On one of those walks, in March, Grace took my hand. Not accidentally, not because she was frightened, because she wanted to. We stopped under a street lamp while rain tapped softly through the leaves. "I am still scared," she said. "I know. I do not know if I am ready to love anyone." "I know. That is not fair to you?" "Maybe not." "Why are you still here?" I had carried the answer for 12 days in Alaska, and for months afterward in Savannah. This time, I said it. "Because I love you." She closed her eyes. I did not move. I did not ask for an answer. After a long moment, she opened her eyes and said, "I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything tonight." "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow we buy peaches." She laughed. Then she stepped forward and rested her forehead against my chest. That was our first real yes. Our son was born in July, in heat so thick the whole city seemed to melt by noon. Labor lasted forever. Or maybe it only felt that way because waiting outside a delivery room bends time into cruel shapes. I sat in the hallway and could not read, could not work, could not think. I kept seeing the first night in Alaska. Grace in the yard with 2 suitcases. The pale coat, the fog, the stolen purse, the attorney letter, the rain in Savannah. All of it compressed into one impossible line leading to that door. When the nurse finally came out, she smiled. "It's a boy. They're both doing well." I entered the room as if crossing into a country whose language I did not yet speak. Grace lay against the pillows, exhausted, hair damp at her temples, face pale and luminous in a way I have never known how to describe. In her arms was a small red serious-looking baby with his fists tucked under his chin. He slept with absolute trust, the kind of trust the world has not yet had time to complicate. I sat beside them. Grace turned her head. "Well?" she whispered. I could not speak. I only took her hand. She squeezed my fingers so hard it hurt. We named him Luke. We were married in September in a small church off one of Savannah's old squares. Nothing grand, nothing loud. A few people from my engineering office. Nina from the flower shop, who had become Grace's first real friend in the city. Ruth, an elderly neighbor from downstairs who brought pecan cookies and cried openly through the entire ceremony, as if she had personally arranged our happiness and was satisfied with her work. Grace wore a simple cream dress. No veil, no drama. Around her wrist was a bracelet of dried flowers Nina had made, something about long life and stubborn joy. Luke slept in a stroller near the back. He had a gift for sleeping through important adult decisions. At one point during the ceremony, Grace felt me looking at her. She turned her head and smiled. Quiet. Only for me. That was all. No music could have improved it. No speech, no perfect phrase. Just that smile in the old church, and the knowledge that everything before it, every broken, impossible mile, had led us there. Now, when I think back on it, I think about how strange life is. If Ryan had not lied, Grace would never have come to Alaska. If her purse had not been stolen, she would have left in 2 days, and I would never have seen her again. If he had not sent that attorney letter, I might never have found the loose thread that pulled his whole scheme apart. Every terrible thing became a step. I do not thank Ryan, no, but I am grateful for the fog, the yard, the cold curb, the stolen purse, the rain in Savannah, the letter that tried to scare us and instead gave us the opening we needed. I am grateful for all of it because it brought me here. Here is a small apartment that smells of flowers most evenings, because Grace comes home with green stains on her fingers. Here is Luke laughing behind the door, no longer so tiny, already walking, already saying words that sound like discoveries. Here is Grace telling me, "You're early, dinner isn't ready." And here is me saying, "That's all right, I'll wait." Because I would. I would wait through fog, through cold, through fear, through every difficult silence. I would wait because some people arrive in your life like a question, and if you are brave enough to stay, they become the answer. That is what Grace became. Not a rescue, not a miracle, a real life. And real life, I have learned, is worth every mile to the edge of the world.